Thank you very much. Barack Obama. Post-Summit of America's press conference. Delivered April 11, 2015, Panama City, Panama. I want to begin by once again thanking President Varela and the people of Panama City and all the Panamanian people for being such excellent hosts at this Summit of the Americas. Given its strategic location, a place where cultures and commerce of our hemisphere have long intersected, Panama has often been called the crossroads of the world. And with Panama's leadership, our nations have come together to focus on the world. On the future, and on what we can build for the 1 billion people of the Americas. This has been my third Summit of the Americas and my 8th visit to Latin America. And my trip reflects, as I mentioned earlier, a new era of U.S. engagement in the region. Over the past few days we've advanced our engagement across the board. In keeping with the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We continue to stand up strongly for democracy and human rights. This was the first Summit of the Americas to include a formal role for civil society. As I said at yesterday's forum, the United States will continue to deepen our support for civil society groups across the Americas and around the world. I'm pleased that there was widespread agreement among the nations. Here that civil society groups have a permanent role in future summits. And the United States will support this work through the new innovation. Center we're creating to empower civil society groups across Latin America. How to promote greater opportunity for the Cuban people was also a major focus of my meeting with President Castro. The first between leaders of our two nations in more than half a century. I told President Castro in private what I have said in public, that our governments will continue to have differences, and the United States will continue to stand firmly for universal values and human rights. At the same time, we agreed that we can continue to take steps forward that advance our mutual interests. We'll continue to work toward re-establishing diplomatic relations, reopening embassies in Havana and Washington. And encouraging greater contacts and commerce and exchanges between our citizens. I'm optimistic that we'll continue to make progress and that this can indeed be a turning point. Not just between the United States and Cuba, but for greater cooperation among countries across the region. Second, we continued our work to create more prosperity and opportunity for our people. At our meeting yesterday, Central American leaders reaffirmed their commitment to pursue the good. Governance and economic and security reforms that are needed. And I reiterated my commitment to working with Congress to secure the $1 billion I proposed for our engagement with Central America. Yesterday's deal between Boeing and Copa Airlines will support jobs in the United States, in Panama, and across the region. And I think is representative of the commercial opportunities that allow both North and Southern hemispheres, both North and South America, as well as Central America, to prosper if we deepen those trade ties. I was encouraged by the support of many leaders here for the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. Which would boost regional trade, and for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. With its high standards for trade and strong protections for workers and the environment. Thanks to Panama's leadership. This summit included a special focus on how countries can expand access to education. I want to thank our private sector partners who pledged to continue their support of our 100. Strong in the Americas initiative to encourage more exchanges between our students. The nearly $70 million in investments that I've announced in Jamaica will expand. Education and training and employment programs for young people across Latin America and the Caribbean. Including in impoverished and marginalized communities. And the Young Leaders of the Americas initiative that I launched will help young entrepreneurs and civil society leaders across the entire region access the training and the resources and connections they need to start new ventures. Including the small businesses that create so many jobs in the region. Finally, we took new steps to invest in clean energy and combat climate change. The new fund I announced with our Caribbean and Central American partners will help mobilize private sector investment in clean energy projects and reduce carbon emissions across the region. And our new energy task force will identify additional steps we can take together. A number of our countries committed to doubling our collective share of non-hydro renewable energy by 2030. I reaffirmed that, through our $3 billion pledge to the Green Climate Fund. the United States will continue to help developing nations deal with the impacts of climate change. And I reiterated our commitment to ensure that all countries in the hemisphere have open access to climate data as we meet this challenge together. So, continued progress on Cuba, new commitments to help lift up young people in the region. New partnerships to protect this beautiful land and our planet. As I said this morning, the United States is more deeply engaged across the region than we have been in decades. And I believe the relationship between the United States and the Americas is as good as it has ever been. We're focused on the future and what we can build and achieve together. And our engagement with the countries and peoples of the Americas. Is going to continue throughout the remainder of my presidency. So, with that, let me take some questions. I'll start with Jim Coonhen. Question, thank you, Mr. President. Sir, you head back to the United States with the task of convincing the American people and Congress on two major foreign policy initiatives: the framework for a nuclear deal with Iran and likely soon, the decision to remove Cuba from a list of state sponsors of terror. Recent remarks by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini have raised doubts among some as to whether that deal can occur in Iran. And Senator Schumer, an ally of yours, has wants Congress to have the right to vote on removal of sanctions. Presidential politics are likely to play a part in this Cuba decision inevitably. So I'm wondering if it would take a lot of political capital just to get one done, let alone two. Have you bitten off more than you can chew? President Obama, no. You may be surprised by that response, Jim. Let me take them in turn. First of all, with respect to Cuba, there is majority support of our policy in the United States. And there's overwhelming support for our policy in Cuba. I think people recognize that if you keep on doing something for 50 years and it doesn't work, you should try something new. And so the American people don't need to be persuaded that this is, in fact, the right thing to do. I recognize that there are still concerns and questions that Congress may have. We've got concerns and questions about specific activities that are taking place in Cuba, and human rights and reform. And there were two members of the Cuban civil society that were in attendance at the meeting. That I had yesterday, who expressed much of what they have to go through on a day-to-day basis. They were supportive of our policy of engagement with Cuba. And so I don't think that it's so much we have to persuade anybody. The issue of the state sponsor of terrorism list, as you know. The State Department has provided a recommendation, it's gone through our interagency process. I'll be honest with you, I have been on the road, and I want to make sure that I have a chance to read it. Study it, before we announce publicly what the policy outcome is going to be. But in terms of the overall direction of Cuba policy, I think there is a strong majority both. in the United States and in Cuba that says our ability to engage to open up commerce and travel and people-to-people exchanges is ultimately going to be good for the Cuban people. Now, with respect to Iran, I have always been clear, we are not done yet. What we were able to obtain was a political framework between the P5+1 nations and Iran that provided unprecedented verification of what is taking place in Iran over the next 2 decades that significantly cuts back on its centrifuges. That cuts up pathways for it to obtain a nuclear weapon. And that calls for, in return, the rolling back of sanctions in a phased way that allows us to snap back if Iran violates the agreement. That's the political framework. That was not just something that the United States and Iran agreed to. But Iran agreed to a political framework with the other P5+1 nations. Now, what's always been clear is that Iran has its own politics around this issue. They have their own hardliners. They have their own countervailing impulses in terms of whether or not to go forward with something, just as we have in our country. And so it's not surprising to me that the Supreme Leader or a whole bunch of other people are going to try to characterize the deal in a way that protects their political position. But I know what was discussed in arriving at the political agreement. What I've always said, though, is that there's the possibility of backsliding. There's the possibility that it doesn't get memorialized in a way that satisfies us, that we're able to verify that. In fact, Iran is not getting a nuclear weapon. and that we are preserving the capacity to snap back sanctions in the event that they are breaking any deal.